Hey guys, tonight we are going to drift back through the centuries, crossing the misty seas of time to land in the complex, beautiful, and incredibly strict world of feudal Japan. Imagine the faint sound of temple bells ringing in the distance, the smell of rain on thatched roofs, and the serene aesthetic of a rock garden. It sounds peaceful, doesn't it? But here is the reality check. You probably won't survive this. Between the rigid caste system, the lack of antibiotics, and the fact that you might get beheaded for walking on the wrong side of the road, your odds are slim. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Go ahead and drop a comment letting me know where in the world you are watching from and what time it is. I love seeing those timestamps roll in from every corner of the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your consciousness slowly returns to you, drifting up from the depths of sleep, but the first thing you notice isn't the morning light or the chirping of birds. It's the pain in your neck. It feels as though you fell asleep on a hardwood floor, and as you try to shift your weight, you realize with a sinking feeling that you essentially have. You are lying on a tatami mat. It's a woven straw mat, smelling faintly of dried grass and earth, which is a lovely, natural scent, but as a mattress, it offers about as much give as a stale cracker. You try to roll over, pulling the heavy, somewhat scratchy quilt, the futon, up to your chin, but the cold is pervasive. It's not just in the room, it feels like the room is made of the cold. You are waking up in a traditional Japanese house, likely in the Edo period, given the relative peace, though the draft feels like a war crime. You push yourself up, and your hand slips off the pillow you were using. It isn't a pillow at all. It's a takamakura, a small, hard wooden stand with a tiny cushion of buckwheat hulls on top. It looks more like a piece of torturous gym equipment than bedding. This device was designed to support the neck so that the elaborate waxed hairstyles of the era wouldn't get crushed during sleep. Since you probably don't have a waxed top knot that took 3 hours to style, you've just spent 8 hours balancing your cervical spine on a block of lacquered wood for absolutely no reason. You sit up and look around. The room is dim, illuminated only by the gray light filtering through the paper walls. Yes, paper. The walls of your new bedroom are shoji screens, latticed wooden frames covered in translucent washi paper. They are undeniably beautiful. They glow with a soft, diffused light that makes everything look filtered and cinematic. However, you quickly realize the architectural flaw in living inside an origami project. Insulation is a myth. The wind outside doesn't just knock on the door, it seeps through the porous paper, slides through the gaps in the sliding tracks, and rises up through the floorboards. You see, traditional Japanese architecture is brilliant for the humid, stifling summers. The houses are raised off the ground on wooden posts to keep the floor dry and allow air to circulate under your feet, preventing rot and mold. That's fantastic in August, but right now, in the chill of early morning, that crawl space underneath you is just a wind tunnel, refrigerating your backside. You wrap your arms around yourself, shivering, It's a common misconception that everyone in the past was tougher than us. While they certainly complained less about Wi-Fi speeds, they definitely complained about the cold. You slide off the raised floor of the sleeping area, and your bare feet hit the wooden planks of the corridor. You make your way toward the source of the light. You reach out to slide open the shoji. It moves with a satisfying, smooth rattle, wood on wood. There are no metal hinges or doorknobs here. The entire house is a puzzle of joinery. This is one of those mainstream historical facts that is actually as cool as it sounds. Japanese carpenters, or daiku, built these structures using complex interlocking joints, fitting timber together so perfectly that they didn't need nails. This wasn't just for aesthetics. In a land prone to earthquakes, a rigid, nailed-together house snaps. A flexible, jointed house sways and settles. So, while you are freezing, at least you are statistically less likely to be crushed if the ground starts shaking. You push open the heavy wooden storm shutters, the amado, which were closed last night to protect the fragile paper screens from rain and intruders. Sudden, bright daylight floods the room. You blink, looking out at your surroundings. You might be in a rural village, surrounded by rice paddies, or in a cramped row house, a nagaya, in the sprawling metropolis of Edo. Let's assume you're in a nagaya for the full experience. These long houses were essentially one-story apartment complexes with paper-thin walls. And when I say paper-thin, I mean you can hear your neighbor 3 doors down coughing. You can hear the couple next door arguing about the price of daikon radishes. Privacy, in the Western sense of I can close my door and be alone, doesn't really exist here. The concept of personal space is more psychological than physical. You learn to create a mental wall because the physical ones are quite literally made of plant fiber. Historians still argue whether this lack of auditory privacy contributed to the intense social cohesion and group-oriented mindset of the era, or if everyone was just secretly plotting to murder their snoring neighbors but couldn't because the walls offered no soundproofing for the crime. You step back inside to get dressed, shivering again. The only source of heat in the room is a small hibachi or a sunken hearth called an irori in the main room, but the fire has long since died down to ash. You might try to rekindle it later, but for now, the air is crisp. You notice something strange about the layout of the room. There is no furniture, no chairs, no high tables, no wardrobes standing against the wall. Everything is stored away in built-in closets or chests. The room is convertible. It's a bedroom now, but once you fold up that heavy futon and put it away, it becomes a living room, a dining room, or a workspace. It's the ultimate minimalist lifestyle, centuries before Marie Kondo made it trendy, but to your modern eyes, it looks like you've been robbed. There is a fringe superstition you suddenly remember as you look at where your futon was laid out. You check the orientation. Phew, you weren't sleeping with your head pointing north. In Japanese culture, kita makura, sleeping with the head to the north, is strictly reserved for the deceased during funeral rites. If you had woken up in that position, your superstitious neighbors might have had a heart attack thinking you were a reanimated corpse, or a yurei, which would be a terrible way to start your first day. The draft sweeps across your ankles again. You realize that the inside and outside of a Japanese house are fluid concepts. The engawa, that wooden veranda running around the edge of the house, acts as a transitional space. It's not quite inside, not quite outside. In the summer, you'd open everything up and the garden would become part of your living room. Right now, however, you just wish someone had invented double-paned glass. You look down at your hands. They are cold and dry. You need to get moving to generate some body heat. The house is waking up around you, or rather, the neighborhood is, and because of the paper walls, you are waking up with them. The sound of wooden clogs, geta, clopping on the packed earth outside, begins to gently rhythmicize the morning. It's a distinctive karakoro sound that defines the soundscape of the era. You take a deep breath. The air inside the house is stagnant, with the smell of old charcoal and the musty scent of the straw mats, but it's crisp. You survived the night, despite the lack of central heating and the pillow that tried to rearrange your vertebrae. But as the sun begins to climb higher, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the shaft of light from the open shutter, you realize that waking up was the easy part. The real challenge is about to begin. You have to leave this fragile, freezing wooden box and navigate a world where biological necessity is about to collide with a very public, very pungent reality. You step down from the raised wooden floor of your house into the genkan, the entryway. This is the designated dirty zone, a small square of packed earth or stone where the outside world meets the pristine interior. You slip your feet into a pair of straw sandals, or waraji, tying the rough laces around your ankles. They are surprisingly light, though they offer zero arch support, and you can already feel the ground through the thin woven soles. Stepping out through the sliding front door, the morning air hits you, carrying a scent that is, well, let's call it complex. You might expect the smell of cherry blossoms or incense, but the dominant olfactory experience of a feudal Japanese morning is much earthier. You are smelling the economy at work, specifically the economy of human waste. In Europe around this same time, chamber pots were being unceremoniously dumped out of windows into the street, creating open sewers that bred cholera and typhoid. But here in Japan, waste is far too valuable to throw away. It is a commodity. You are walking through a society that has perfected the art of recycling absolutely everything, including what you leave behind in the toilet. As you walk down the narrow dirt street, hugging the side to avoid the mud in the center, you hear a shout, "Shimogoi!" A man is pulling a cart laden with wooden buckets. He is a collector of night soil. In a country with relatively few domesticated animals, no vast herds of cows or sheep to provide manure, human waste was the primary fertilizer for the rice paddies. It was so critical to agriculture that landlords actually owned the rights to the fecal matter produced by their tenants. If you were a tenant in a row house, your landlord would get angry if you used a public toilet while out running errands. You were literally flushing his profits away. You watch the night soil man carefully ladle the contents of a roadside privy into his buckets. He moves with the practiced efficiency of a milkman, but with a much grimier cargo. This trade was highly regulated. The price of night soil actually varied depending on the diet of the household. Waste from the wealthy districts, where people ate more fish and white rice, fetched a higher price than waste from the poorer districts, where the diet was nutrient-poor millet and vegetables. It's a bizarre, fringe tidbit of history. Your socioeconomic status could be determined by the market value of your trips to the bathroom. You try to breathe through your mouth as you pass the cart, offering a polite nod that isn't returned. He's busy. This system, while smelly, kept Japanese cities incredibly clean compared to their Western counterparts. There were no open sewers teeming with rats. The waste was collected, carted out of the city, fermented, which killed many of the pathogens, and returned to the soil. It was a closed ecological loop. However, it did have one major downside for the unwary traveler. The parasites, roundworms and hookworms, were endemic because the fermentation process wasn't always long enough to kill the eggs. So, while you aren't wading through filth, you are walking through a biological minefield. You turn a corner heading towards the communal well. The streets are narrow, flanked by wooden fences and the blank backs of houses. Privacy laws, or rather, architectural customs, dictated that houses shouldn't look directly into each other. But the streets themselves are bustling. You see peddlers carrying a set of wooden boxes on their backs, selling everything from fresh tofu to seasonal greens. At the well, a group of neighbors is gathered. In the Nagaya life, the well is the water cooler, the Facebook feed, and the news anchor all rolled into one. This is the Edabata Kaigi, literally the well-side meeting. If you want to know who is having an affair, whose son just got a job as an apprentice carpenter, or why the rice prices spiked yesterday, you come here. You wait your turn. Water isn't piped into your house. You have to haul it, bucket by bucket. You watch a woman effortlessly hoist a heavy wooden bucket attached to a bamboo pole. She's chatting animatedly while lifting roughly 30 pounds of water. When it's your turn, you grab the rope. It's wet and slick. You lower the bucket, hearing the splash echoing from the dark depths. The water is cold and clear. Clean water was a point of pride for Edo, which had an advanced system of wooden aqueducts bringing fresh river water into the city. Historians still argue about the exact efficiency of these wooden pipes versus Roman stone aqueducts, but considering they were made of hollowed-out logs and square wooden flumes sealed with boat caulking, the engineering is impressive. You haul the bucket up, your muscles straining. You splash some water on your face. It's freezing. There is no soap, at least not the bar soap you know. You might use a small bag of rice bran, Nuka, which acts as a gentle exfoliant and cleanser. It smells oaty and milky. As you dry your face with a tenuguai, a thin, flat-woven cotton towel that never seems to get fully dry, you notice people staring. You realize you are standing in the middle of the street, blocking the flow of traffic. And the traffic here is fascinating. There are no horses or carriages clattering through these narrow residential alleys. It's all foot traffic. The silence is striking. No engines, no horns, just the shuffle of sandals, the clack of wooden clogs, and the murmur of voices. You step aside to let a cargo pass. This is a palanquin, a bamboo basket suspended from a pole carried by two men. Inside, you catch a glimpse of a wealthy merchant or perhaps a low-ranking samurai. The bearers are grunting rhythmically, moving in a synchronized trot to minimize the bouncing for the passenger. You think about hailing one, like a taxi, but then you remember your status. If you are a commoner, a cargo is a luxury you probably can't afford unless you are sick or elderly. You are walking. Navigating the street requires constant awareness. You have to dodge the night soil carts, the peddlers with their swinging pole loads, and the stray dogs. Surprisingly, dogs in this era were often protected, especially under the eccentric laws of Shogun Tokugawa Tsunayoshi, known as the Dog Shogun, who issued edicts protecting stray dogs to an extreme degree. Kicking a dog could literally get you executed, so when a mangy cur growls at you near the well, you don't shoo it away. You bow politely to the dog and shuffle around it. It's safer that way. The sun is fully up now, burning off the morning mist. The smells of the street are shifting. The sharp tang of the night soil is being replaced by the smell of wood smoke and cooking. Grilled fish, miso soup, and pickling brine. Your stomach rumbles, but before you can eat, you have to get back home and deal with the next hurdle of your morning, getting dressed. And if you thought the architectural drafts were a challenge, wait until you try to figure out the geometry of a kimono without a mirror or zippers. You hoist your water bucket, the heavy wood digging into your palm, and trudge back toward your paper-walled apartment. You are already exhausted, and you haven't even had breakfast yet. You set the heavy water bucket down in the doma, the earthen-floored kitchen area, and step back up onto the tatami. It is time to get dressed. In the modern world, this is a mindless activity involving zippers, elastic waistbands, and perhaps a quick sniff test. In feudal Japan, getting dressed is a ritual, a geometry puzzle, and a legal minefield all rolled into one. You open a wooden chest, a tansu, and pull out your clothes. If you were expecting the silky, flowing robes you see in movies, you are in for a disappointment. Unless you are a high-ranking samurai or a very wealthy merchant, you are holding a bundle of indigo-dyed hemp or cotton. Silk is strictly regulated. We will get to that in a moment, but first, you have to navigate the underwear situation. For men, this means the fundoshi, a long strip of white cotton cloth. It's essentially a loincloth that requires a degree of origami skills to apply to your own body. You have to wrap, twist, and tie it in a way that is secure but not circulation cutting. It feels breezy, to say the least. For women, it's the koshimaki, a rectangular piece of cloth wrapped around the hips, and the juban, a simple under kimono. There are no elastics here. Everything stays on by tension and friction. If you tie a knot too loosely, you risk a wardrobe malfunction in the middle of the street. If you tie it too tight, you can't breathe. It's a delicate balance. You pull on the main garment, the kosode, the precursor to the modern kimono. It literally means small sleeves, referring to the smaller wrist opening compared to the gaping sleeves of court nobles from earlier eras. You slip your arms in. The fabric is stiff. If it's hemp, it scratches against your skin like a mild exfoliant. If it's cotton, it's softer but heavy. Now here is the most critical rule of Japanese fashion, the one you must never ever forget: left over right. You wrap the left side of the garment over the right side. Do not get this wrong. Wrapping the right side over the left is reserved exclusively for dressing the dead for burial. If you walk out of your house with your kimono wrapped right over left, you will not only look like an idiot, but you will also freak people out. It's the visual equivalent of walking around with a kick me sign that also implies you are a ghost. You double check in the dim light, left over right. Okay, you're still among the living. Next comes the obi, the sash. This isn't just a belt, it's a structural support beam for your midsection. For men, it's a narrow sash tied low on the hips. For women, in this era, the obi is becoming wider and more decorative, requiring a complex knot that is nearly impossible to tie by yourself without disjointing your shoulders. You struggle with the fabric, winding it around your waist. It needs to be tight enough to hold the heavy layers of the kimono together, as there are no buttons or zippers. By the time you cinch it, you feel your posture forcibly corrected. You cannot slouch in a kimono. The garment demands that you stand up straight. You feel trussed up, packaged like a gift that no one is allowed to open. But the physical struggle is nothing compared to the legal anxiety. As you smooth out the wrinkles, you have a moment of panic. Is this shade of blue allowed? You are living under the sumptuary laws, or kenyaku-rei. The shogunate government was obsessed with maintaining the social hierarchy, and they believed that you could tell a person's worth by looking at their clothes. They issued edicts telling you exactly what you could and could not wear based on your station. Farmers and commoners were forbidden from wearing silk, satin, or shiny brocades. Bright colors like crimson and purple were reserved for the upper crust. So you are stuck with blue, brown, gray, and black, mostly blue. The indigo dye used for commoner clothes had a distinct smell, earthy and slightly fermented, which is said to repel insects and snakes. That's the mainstream historical fact. The widespread use of indigo wasn't just aesthetic, it was a wearable pesticide. However, the human spirit hates being told what to do, especially when it comes to fashion. So, the people of Edo developed a rebellious aesthetic called iki. It's a concept of chic, understated cool. Since they couldn't wear bright colors on the outside, they got creative. They developed 48 browns and 100 grays, an endless variety of nuanced shades that technically followed the law but were visually distinct and stylish to the trained eye. You might be wearing a mouse gray kimono, but is it willow mouse, grape mouse, or lavender mouse? The government officials, mostly rough samurai from the provinces, often couldn't tell the difference, but your neighbors could. And then there is the fringe tidbit that defines the era's fashion rebellion, the hidden luxury, or uramasa. Since you couldn't show off your wealth on the outside, you hid it on the inside. A wealthy merchant might wear a plain, rough-spun cotton kimono to walk down the street, adhering perfectly to the laws. But the lining of that kimono, it might be made of the most exquisite, expensive red silk, printed with erotica or gold leaf designs. The undergarments might be worth more than a samurai's annual salary. It was a secret wink, a hidden indulgence that only you and your lover knew about. It's the ultimate stealth wealth. You check your own collar, just plain cotton. You aren't a secret millionaire today. You are just trying to avoid being arrested by the fashion police. And yes, there were officials who monitored this. If you were caught wearing a fabric above your station, you could be fined, or in extreme cases, have the offending clothes cut off you in public. Historians still argue about how strictly these laws were actually enforced in the later years of the Edo period. Some evidence suggests they were widely flouted and only cracked down on during economic reforms, while others suggest the fear of punishment was a constant low-level stressor for the upwardly mobile merchant class. You finish tying your obi and tuck your tenuguai, that damp towel from earlier, into the sash. You realize you have no pockets. The kimono sleeves, or tamoto, act as your pockets. You slide a few coins and perhaps a small, woodblock printed charm into the sleeve. It's a clever design, but if you wave your arms too vigorously, your wallet flies out. You make a mental note to move with dignified, restricted gestures. Finally dressed, you look down at yourself. You look like a potato sack tied in the middle, but a very culturally appropriate potato sack. The layers trap your body heat, finally warming you up from the morning chill. The tightness of the obi provides a strange sense of security, like a weighted blanket wrapped around your waist. You feel held together. You step back into the doma to slide into your footwear. If it's dry, you wear zori, flat straw sandals. If it's muddy or rainy, you wear geta, wooden clogs raised on two teeth, hei-a, that make you 2 inches taller and sound like a percussion section when you walk. You choose the zori. Your toes grip the thong, the hanao. There is a distinct skill to walking in these, without them slapping against your heels like cheap flip-flops. You have to slide your feet, shuffling slightly. This namba walk, moving the right arm and right leg together, rather than the opposing swing we use today, was the standard way of moving in a kimono to keep the fabric from bunching up. You are now decent. You are legally compliant, hopefully. You are insulated against the wind, but the effort has burned calories, and your stomach is now demanding attention. It's time to face the culinary reality of your station. You might be dreaming of pancakes or eggs Benedict, but what's waiting for you is a bowl of grain that looks suspiciously like birdseed and a vegetable that has been sitting in a bucket of salt for 3 months. You kneel on the wooden floor of the doma, or perhaps on a thin cushion in the main room, facing a small, low table called a chabudai. It's time for breakfast. Now, if you have watched any anime or historical dramas, you are probably picturing a steaming bowl of fluffy, glistening white rice. You might be imagining it paired with a grilled salmon fillet and perhaps a perfectly rolled omelet. I hate to be the one to snatch that imaginary tray away from you, but we need to talk about the economics of carbohydrates in feudal Japan. You look down at your bowl. It is not filled with white rice. In fact, if you are a peasant living in a rural village, seeing a bowl full of pure white rice probably means one of 2 things. It is a festival day, or someone is about to die, and this is their last meal. For the vast majority of the population, white rice was not food, it was money. It was the gold standard. The entire economy was measured in koku, a unit defined as the amount of rice enough to feed one person for 1 year, roughly 150 kilograms or 330 pounds. Taxes were paid in rice. Samurai stipends were paid in rice. To eat your rice was essentially to eat your paycheck. So what is in your bowl? It is a grainy, brownish-yellow heap that looks distressingly like birdseed. This is millet, his or awa, perhaps mixed with some barley, mugi, or daikon radish to bulk it up. This mixture is known as kate meshi. It is chewy, slightly dry, and has an earthy flavor that is acquiring. You take a bite, It requires significantly more chewing than modern rice. You are getting a workout just trying to digest your breakfast. If you are lucky, you might have brown rice or unpolished rice genmai. Ironically, in the modern world, we pay a premium for brown rice because it's healthy. In the Edo period, eating brown rice was a sign that you were too poor to afford the polishing process. But here is the fringe tidbit that might actually save your life. The wealthy samurai and merchants living in the big city of Edo, who looked down on your millet and brown rice, were suffering from a mysterious, debilitating disease. They called it Edo Wazurai, or the Edo affliction. Their legs would swell, they would become lethargic, and eventually their hearts would fail. We know it today as beriberi. It was caused by a vitamin B1 deficiency. By polishing the rice to make it white and pretty, they stripped away the bran containing the essential vitamins. So chipist, while you sit there chewing your dry, scratchy millet, take comfort in the fact that your poverty is actively preventing you from dying of a vitamin deficiency. You are eating the original superfood diet, not by choice, but by economic necessity. Next to your bowl of grains sits a small saucer of tsukemono, pickles. But forget the vinegar-brined dill pickles of the West. These are vegetables, usually daikon radish, cucumber, or leafy greens, that have been buried in a crock of fermented rice bran and salt for months. They are intensely salty, pungent, and crunchy. In a diet that is overwhelmingly bland and starchy, these pickles are the flavor bomb. They are also your primary source of electrolytes. You take a piece of yellow, pickled daikon, called takwan, and crunch into it. The sound echoes in the quiet room. It's so salty it makes your jaw ache, but it helps you get another mouthful of the dry millet down. Then there is the soup, a lacquered wooden bowl of miso shiru. You lift the bowl to your lips. No spoons here. You drink directly from the bowl while using your chopsticks to guide the solid bits into your mouth. The miso soup of the past was darker, saltier, and much heartier than the delicate broth you get in sushi restaurants today. It was a source of protein and warmth. Floating in it might be some cubes of tofu, seaweed, or if times are tough, just some vegetable scraps. You hold your chopsticks, or hashi, with care. Table manners are strict, even when you are eating millet. You never ever stick your chopsticks vertically into your rice bowl. That resembles the incense sticks offered to the dead at a Buddhist altar. Doing so at the breakfast table is considered incredibly inauspicious, a silent invitation for the Grim Reaper to pull up a chair. You rest them horizontally on the bowl or a small rest. As you eat, you consider the one soup, one side rule, ichiju isai. The meal consists of the staple grain, a soup, and pickles. Anything else, fish, simmered vegetables, beans, is considered okazu, a side dish to accompany the rice. The grain is the main character, everything else is just a supporting actor. You might have a small piece of dried sardine or a plum pickled in salt, umeboshi, but meat is rare. Japan was officially a Buddhist nation, and for centuries the consumption of four-legged animals, cattle, horses, pigs, was taboo. It was considered unclean. People did eat wild boar or deer occasionally, euphemistically calling boar mountain whale, yamakujira, to get around the religious guilt. But for the most part, you are a pescatarian vegetarian. Historians still argue about the true extent of this meat ban. While official edicts prohibited it, archaeological evidence from trash pits of the era suggests that people were secretly enjoying a fair amount of duck, badger, and even monkey meat when the authorities weren't looking. It seems the don't ask, don't tell policy applied to stew pots as well as fashion. But today, your breakfast is strictly vegetarian. You finish the last of the millet, pouring a little hot tea into the bowls to swish around and clean up the last few grains, a practice called shazuke. You drink the tea rice slurry. Nothing is wasted. You feel full, but it's a heavy, sitting fullness. The caloric density is low, but the fiber content is off the charts. You are fueled up for a day of labor, powered almost entirely by complex carbohydrates and salt. You set the bowl down and exhale. The house is quiet. The simple act of eating has warmed you up. You look at the empty table. There is no coffee to jolt you awake, no sugar crash waiting in an hour. It is a slow-burning fuel. You wipe your mouth with your tenugui. The sun is higher now, casting sharp shadows through the lattice of the shoji screens. The sounds of the street are getting louder. You can hear the cry of a vendor selling clams, asari, shijimi. You know that soon you have to go out there. You have to navigate the social hierarchy that is even more rigid than the dietary one. You stand up, your knees cracking slightly from sitting in the seiza position, kneeling with your legs folded under you. You are learning that life in feudal Japan requires flexible joints, kneeling to eat, kneeling to sleep, kneeling to greet people. Your ankles are going to be sore for a week. You slide your feet back into your zori sandals at the entryway. The wooden door rattles as you slide it open again. The bright light hits you. You step out onto the dirt road, your belly full of millet and your breath smelling faintly of pickled radish. You are ready to face the world. But as you look down the street, you see a procession approaching. A group of men with 2 swords at their waists are walking down the center of the road with an air of absolute authority. Your heart skips a beat. The food in your stomach suddenly feels like lead. You are about to encounter the ruling class, and you need to remember the rules of the road instantly. It's not just about being polite. It's about keeping your head attached to your shoulders. The millet provided the energy, but now you need the discipline. You freeze, watching them approach, and your mind races through the etiquette lessons you hopefully absorbed. It is time to bow, and you better make sure it is low enough. You freeze in the middle of the narrow dirt road. The morning chatter of the Nagaya has evaporated instantly, replaced by a tense, heavy silence that feels thick enough to choke on. The procession is about 30 feet away and closing the gap with a terrifyingly disciplined rhythm. Leading the pack are 2 men dressed in crisp, dark kamishimo, broad-shouldered hemp vests that wing out at the sides, making them look like angry geometric kites. But it's not the fashion that grabs your attention. It's what is tucked into their obis. 2 swords, the daisho, the long katana, and the shorter wakizashi. This is the signature of the samurai class, the warrior elite who hold the power of life and death in their manicured hands. Your modern brain might be thinking, oh cool, a samurai. But your feudal survival instinct needs to kick in immediately and scream, get out of the way. In feudal Japan, the road is not a public utility shared equally by all taxpayers. It is a stage for social theater. When a samurai walks down the street, he owns the street. The center of the road is his domain. You, the millet-eating commoner, belong in the dirt on the edges. You scramble to the side of the road, practically diving into the dusty verge. You are not alone. Around you, the vegetable peddler has lowered his heavy baskets, the fishmonger has silenced his sales pitch, and the children have been yanked behind their mothers' kimono sleeves. It is a synchronized wave of submission. Now you have to perform the bow, and don't think a casual nod or a handshake-style dip will suffice. This is a matter of survival geometry. You drop to your knees if they are of particularly high rank, or you bend at the waist so deeply that your nose is practically inspecting your own sandals. This is the ojigi. You keep your eyes cast down. Making eye contact with a samurai is not seen as firm and professional as it is in a modern job interview. Here, it is an act of aggression. It implies equality. It implies challenge. If you lock eyes with a warrior whose entire identity is built on honor and martial prowess, you are essentially asking him to test his blade on your neck. So you stare at the dirt. You become fascinatingly interested in a small pebble near your left toe. As the footsteps get closer, the crunch of leather-soled sandals on gravel, you hold your breath. You can smell them as they pass. Unlike the earthy, sweaty scent of the commoners, the samurai smell of clove oil used to maintain their sword blades, and bintsuke, the wax used to style their intricate top knots. It's a scent of expensive grooming and lethal capacity. Here is the mainstream historical fact that keeps your forehead sweating: Kirasute Gomen. Literal translation: authorization to cut and leave. In the strict class hierarchy of the Edo period, a samurai had the legal right to strike down a commoner who compromised their honor or acted in a disrespectful manner. And the gomen part, which usually means sorry or pardon me, in this context means they could do it without facing criminal charges. They could literally kill you, apologize for the mess, and keep walking. It is one of the most terrifying legal privileges in history. If you bumped into his scabbard, splashed mud on his hakama pants, or failed to bow quickly enough, technically you were fair game. However, as you tremble in your squat, listening to the swish of silk passing inches from your nose, it's worth noting the nuance. Historians still argue whether Kirasute Gomen was a rampant, bloody occurrence or a rare, extreme measure that was more theoretical than practical. The reality, as is often the case with history, was buried in bureaucracy. While a samurai could cut you down, he then had to report the incident to the magistrate. He had to provide witnesses. He had to prove that your disrespect was intolerable. If the government decided he had acted rashly or out of anger rather than honor, he could lose his status, his stipend, or be ordered to commit seppuku. Basically, killing a peasant involved a mountain of paperwork and a high risk of career suicide. So most samurai weren't walking around slicing people up for fun. It was just too much administrative hassle. But do you want to be the test case today? Absolutely not. There is a fringe tidbit about road etiquette that you suddenly recall as you watch the scabbards pass by from the corner of your eye. It's the concept of saya-at. When two samurai passed each other, they had to be incredibly careful. Samurai wore their swords on the left hip to draw with the right hand. Therefore, they always walked on the left side of the road so that their swords would be on the outside, away from the person passing them. This prevented their scabbards from clashing. If two samurai bumped scabbards, saya-ate, it was considered a grave insult, often leading to an immediate duel. This is actually why Japan still drives on the left side of the road today. It's a holdover from avoiding accidental sword fights during the rush hour commute. For you, a commoner without a sword, the rule is simple: stay out of the sword radius. If you accidentally brush against a samurai's weapon, you are touching his soul. The sword was believed to be the repository of the samurai's spirit. Touching it with your dirty commoner hands is a spiritual pollution that might be cleansed with your blood. You shrink back further, pressing yourself against the wooden slat fence of a merchant's shop. The procession is long. Behind the samurai, there are servants carrying luggage on poles, perhaps a spear bearer holding a lance covered in a decorative sheath. You notice the mon, or family crest, printed on their backs. It might be the 3 hollyhock leaves of the Tokugawa clan, in which case you should probably bury your face in the dirt, or the butterfly crest of the Taira. Your legs are starting to burn. Holding a half squat or a deep bow for 2 minutes is physically demanding, but you don't move, you don't twitch, you don't swat at the fly buzzing around your ear. To sneeze now would be a catastrophe. Finally, the footsteps fade. The tension in the air snaps like a cut rubber band. You hear the vegetable peddler exhale loudly and pick up his baskets. The children start giggling again. The street reinflates with life. You straighten up, your back creaking. You brush the dust off your knees. You have survived the encounter. It's a strange psychological whiplash, going from a relaxed morning walk to a moment of mortal terror and back again in the span of 3 minutes. This is the duality of life in feudal Japan, a serene aesthetic existence punctured by moments of absolute, violent authority. But you can't linger on the trauma. You have somewhere to be. You are not a samurai. You don't have a stipend of rice delivered to your door. You have to go earn it. And since we established earlier that you are eating millet and living in a drafty house, you likely belong to the peasant class, the Hayakusho. This means your destination isn't an office or a shop. It's the edge of the village. You walk past the last row of houses. The city or village limits dissolve into a patchwork quilt of reflective water and green shoots. The rice paddies. They look beautiful, shimmering in the morning sun, reflecting the mountains in the distance like a mirror. It's the classic postcard image of Japan. But as you stare at that scenic view, you realize something horrific. You aren't just here to look at it. You have to get in it. The rice doesn't plant itself. You approach the edge of the paddy. The water is murky. You know exactly what is in that water. Remember the night soil collector from section 2? Yeah, it's a mix of mud, water, and the village's collective contribution to agriculture. And you have to wade into it, barefoot, up to your knees. You look down at your clean feet, then at the mud. You sigh. The glamorous life of a villager is about to reveal its wet, back-breaking reality. You tuck the hem of your kimono up into your obi, exposing your legs, and take the first squelching step into the muck. The water is colder than you expected, and the mud sucks at your ankles like it wants to pull you down into the underworld. You stand calf deep in the slurry of the rice paddy. The mud, a mixture of clay, water, and that potent night soil fertilizer, oozes between your toes. It feels slimy and surprisingly dense, like stepping into a giant bowl of cold oatmeal. The suction is intense. Every time you try to lift a foot, the mud fights to keep you, making a wet, sucking thwook sound that will become the soundtrack of your day. Welcome to the glamour of being a hyakusho. While the samurai are busy polishing their swords and writing haiku about cherry blossoms, you are the engine of the entire Japanese economy. You are a rice farmer. And during the planting season, or taue, this is your life from sunrise to sunset. You look out across the field. It's a grid of water-filled squares, separated by narrow earthen ridges called A's. Your task is to transplant young rice seedlings from a nursery bed into the main paddy. It sounds simple enough. Take plant, put in mud. but the precision required is maddening. You have to plant them in perfectly straight rows with exact spacing between each cluster. If you plant them too close, they won't get enough sun, too far apart, and you waste precious space, which means less rice for taxes, which means, well, we'll get to the taxes later. You bend over, and you stay bent over. This isn't a bend down, plant, stand up situation. You maintain a 90-degree angle at the hips, shuffling backward through the mud as you go. Your lower back begins to scream within the first 20 minutes. By hour 4, your spine feels like it has fused into a permanent hook shape. There is a rhythm to it, though. Often, the planting is done communally, a system called UI. The whole village helps one family, then moves to the next. To keep the rhythm and morale up, there is singing. The Tawe Uta, rice planting songs. They are rhythmic, repetitive chants, often led by a drum or a flute as played by someone standing on the ridge, the lucky guy who doesn't have to be in the mud. You find yourself humming along, your hands moving in time with the beat. Grab a seedling, plunge thumb and 2 fingers into the mud, release, retract, grab, plunge, release, retract. It becomes hypnotic, but the mud hides enemies. As you wade deeper, you feel a sharp prick on your calf. You slap at the water, leeches. The paddies are teeming with them. In the stagnant, nutrient-rich water, they thrive. You look down and see a small black ribbon attached to your skin, bloating as it feeds. You don't have time to be squeamish. You just flick it off with a muddy finger and keep planting. It's just a little blood loss, right? You've got plenty. Then there are the water bugs. Giant water bugs, or tegame, are lurking in the murky depths. These are predatory insects, the size of your hand, that hunt frogs and small fish. If one decides your toe looks like a snack, the bite is notoriously painful, enzymatic venom that liquefies tissue. You shuffle your feet carefully, trying to create vibrations to scare them away. It's not just the wildlife, it's the weather. When the sun is high, there is no shade in a rice paddy. The reflection off the water doubles the UV exposure. You wear a wide-brimmed straw hat, a sujagasa, but the heat radiates up from the muddy water, creating a humid microclimate around your face. You are sweating profusely, but you can't wipe your face because your hands are covered in fertilizer. Here is a mainstream historical fact that adds to the pressure. Rice agriculture in Japan was incredibly labor-intensive compared to wheat farming in Europe. Wheat is broadcast sown. You throw seeds on dry land and wait. Rice requires irrigation management, transplanting, weeding, and draining. It requires cooperation. If your neighbor upstream hoards the water, your paddy dries out and your crop dies. If they drain their paddy too fast, yours floods. This hydrological interdependence is often cited by historians as the root of the Japanese collectivist mindset. You literally cannot survive as a rugged individualist or rice farmer. You either get along with your neighbors or you starve. And the village council manages the water rights with an iron fist. If you are ostracized, a punishment called murahachibu, which we will discuss later, they cut off your water. Game over. But there is a fringe tidbit about the ecosystem you are standing in. It wasn't just rice. The paddies were complex aquaculture systems. As you plant, you notice small fish darting around your ankles. Carp, sidikuai, and crucian carp, funa, were often raised in the flooded paddies. They ate the insect larvae, goodbye mosquitoes, and their waste fertilized the rice. When the paddies were drained for harvest, the farmers harvested the fish too. It was a protein bonus. Ducks were also used, the Iagamo method, where ducks were released into the paddies to eat weeds and pests, paddling around the rice stalks without damaging them. So you aren't just farming grain, you are managing a wet, chaotic, multi-species farm. Midday approaches. Your stomach growls, remembering the millet from this morning. A break is called. You straighten up, your vertebrae cracking audibly. You wade to the A's ridge, scraping the heavy mud off your legs. You sit on the grassy bank, careful not to let your dirty feet touch your food. Lunch is simple. A rice ball, or millet ball, on a giri, wrapped in a bamboo leaf. It's cold and dense, maybe a few pickled plums. You eat quickly, staring at the progress you've made. The green rose looks satisfyingly orderly against the dark water. There is a pride in it. This is the food that sustains the nation. The samurai might rule the country, but you feed it. But as you chew, you look at your hands. They are rough, calloused, and stained. You think about the samurai you saw earlier with their soft, manicured hands. The disparity stings. You also notice something else. The women are working just as hard, if not harder, than the men. In fact, planting was often considered women's work in many regions because it was believed that women possessing the power of fertility could transfer that life force to the seedlings. The Seotome, the rice planting maidens, were symbols of the season. They wore special red sashes and covered their faces with cloth. It looks picturesque in woodblock prints, but the reality is just as grueling for them. The afternoon shift is brutal. The water gets warmer, feeling like bath water, which is not refreshing. Your energy flags. The songs become slower. You start to play mental games to pass the time, counting seedlings, calculating rows. You wonder about the harvest. If the weather holds, if the typhoons don't flatten the crop, if the locusts don't swarm, you might have a good yield. But even if you do, the looming shadow of the tax collector is always there. You look at the sheer volume of rice you are planting. Thousands of stalks. It looks like a fortune, but you know the math. You know the koku system, and you know that the vast majority of what you are planting today will never touch your own bowl. You are essentially gardening for the government. As the sun begins to dip, painting the sky in shades of purple and orange, the reflection in the paddy water becomes breathtaking. For a moment, you forget the leeches and the back pain. The world is doubled, sky above, sky below. You are standing in the middle of the heavens. It is a moment of Zen, a glimpse of the profound connection to nature that defines the culture. Then a mosquito bites you on the eyelid, breaking the spell. The drum beats the signal to stop. You trudge out of the mud, your legs trembling. You wash your legs in an irrigation ditch, watching the cloud of mud drift away downstream. You are exhausted in a way that modern gym workouts can't replicate. It is a bone-deep weariness. You walk home as the frogs begin their evening chorus, a deafening roar rising from the fields you just left. You have survived the planting, but the real anxiety isn't about the work. It's about the reward, or the lack thereof. Because tomorrow, the village headman is coming to assess the potential yield, and that determines your tax. And in feudal Japan, taxes aren't a percentage of your income. They are a percentage of your survival. The harvest season has arrived. The months of bending, weeding, and battling leeches are finally over. The golden sheaves of rice are cut and hung on wooden drying racks, looking like rows of shaggy sun-drenched curtains stretching across the valley. It is a moment of immense satisfaction. You look at the drying grain and think, I made this. But unfortunately, that feeling of ownership is about to be aggressively challenged by a man with a clipboard, or rather a ledger and an abacus. It is tax day. But in feudal Japan, you don't file a return and hope for a refund. The tax collector comes to you, and he brings a squad of assistants who look at your hard-earned crops with the same hungry calculation as the locusts you spent all summer fighting. You stand by the edge of the village square, watching the arrival of the daikon's officials. These are the local administrators acting on behalf of the shogun or the daimyo, feudal lord. They set up a temporary station, a table, an inkstone, and the dreaded masu. The masu is a square wooden measuring box. It looks innocent enough, a simple cubic container. But the way this box is handled determines whether your family survives the winter or starves. This is the reality of the nengu, the annual rice tax. To understand the crushing weight of this moment, you have to understand the currency of the realm. We mentioned it briefly before, but let's dive into the koku. Japan's entire economy is not based on gold or silver, but on rice. One koku is defined as the amount of rice required to feed one adult male for 1 year, approximately 150 kilograms or 330 pounds. The wealth of a feudal lord is measured in koku. A 10,000 koku lord can theoretically feed an army of 10,000 men. The shogun is the ultimate billionaire of carbohydrates. But you are the printing press. You are generating the currency. The official calls your name. You step forward, bowing low. You don't make eye contact. He consults his ledger. Now here is the terrifying part. The tax isn't necessarily based on what you actually grew this year. For a long time, the system relied on chemi, an annual inspection where they checked the yield. But as the bureaucracy grew lazy and efficient, a dangerous combination, they often switched to jomen, a fixed tax rate based on the average yield of the past few years. This sounds fair, like a fixed rate mortgage, until you have a bad year. If a typhoon flattened your crop or a drought shriveled the kernels, the jomen system doesn't care. The Lord still expects his average. If you harvested 50 bushels but owe 60, well, you are in debt to the government, and there is no bankruptcy protection here. You might have to sell your daughter into servitude or sell your land and become a tenant farmer to pay the difference. But let's assume it's a standard year. The official orders your rice to be measured. You watch the assistant pour your precious, polished white rice into the masu box. Here is a mainstream historical fact that induces anxiety. The heaped versus struck measurement. In a fair transaction, you fill the box and strike the top level with a stick. Exact volume. But a corrupt or greedy official might use the Yamamori method, heaping the rice into a mound above the rim. Or worse, he might kick the box. A subtle tap of the foot vibrates the box, causing the rice to settle and pack down, allowing him to pour more in before it looks full. That little kick could cost you weeks of food. You watch his foot, it twitches, you say nothing. To accuse a tax official of cheating is to invite a beating or imprisonment. The standard tax rate is a brutal slogan, go ko go min. 5 to the Lord, 5 to the people. A 50% tax rate. Imagine if the IRS took half of your gross income right off the top before you paid for rent, clothes, or tools. And in some domains, strictly governed by desperate lords, it could go up to shiko rokumin, 6 to the Lord, 4 to the people, or even higher during emergencies. You watch half of your harvest, the best half, the premium white rice, being loaded onto the official carts. This rice is destined for the castle town, then perhaps to the massive rice warehouses in Osaka or Edo, where it will be converted into cash to buy silk, weapons, and tea for the samurai class. You are left with the other half. But wait, you don't get to keep all of that either. You have to pay the village expenses, the cost of the festival, the repair of the irrigation ditches, the salary of the village headman. After all those deductions, you are left with maybe 30% or 40% of what you grew. And remember, rice is money. You need to buy salt, tools, medicine, and fabric. You can't pay for those with millet. So you have to sell more of your remaining rice to a merchant just to get cash for necessities. This leads to the tragic irony of the Japanese farmer. You spend your life knee-deep in rice, but you rarely eat it. The gong farmers, the ones producing the luxury product, subsist on the millet, barley, and vegetable scraps we ate for breakfast. Eating your own white rice is considered a reckless luxury, like burning cash to heat your house. However, humans are adaptable creatures, and the peasantry developed a fringe skill set: creative tax evasion. Historians still argue vigorously about the immiseration of the peasantry. Traditional views paint a picture of peasants squeezed to the brink of starvation, but newer economic history suggests a paradox. Despite the high taxes, the peasant population grew, and life expectancy actually ticked up during the Edo period. How? Because farmers were smarter than the bureaucrats. They had hidden fields, kakushidas. These were secret patches of land deep in the mountains or in ravines that were never registered in the official cadastral surveys. The rice grown there was off the books. It was tax-free income. They also diversified. The tax was on rice, so farmers started growing cash crops that weren't taxed as heavily: cotton, silk, rapeseed for oil, tobacco. They became entrepreneurs. You might look like a poor, mud-stained wretch to the samurai official, but buried under the floorboards of your doma, you might have a stash of silver coins earned from your secret tobacco patch. There is also the false bottom trick. When measuring the rice for the tax, some daring villages would modify the masu boxes or use barrels with false bottoms, though this was incredibly risky. More commonly, they would just act dumb. The bumbling peasant was a carefully cultivated persona. If an official asked why the yield was low, the entire village would coordinate a story about a specific localized blight or a swarm of insects that only ate the tax rice. As the official finishes his calculations, he stamps a receipt. The carts rumble away, heavy with your labor. The village square clears. The atmosphere is a mix of relief, it's over, and depression. We're broke. You walk back to your home, carrying the meager portion that is yours. It feels light, too light. The fear of the starvation months in late winter settles in your stomach. This is the season known as hashikai, the bridge between harvests, when the rice runs out and you are scraping the bottom of the pickle barrel. You enter your house and pour your remaining rice into the family storage chest. You lock it. This isn't just food, it's your savings account, your insurance policy, and your children's future. You sit on the tatami, listening to the wind rattle the shoji. The harvest is done. The taxes are paid. You have survived the bureaucracy, but the year isn't over. Now that the agricultural work has slowed down, the government needs to make sure you don't get lazy or rebellious. It's time to check your travel papers, because in this police state, you can't just decide to take a vacation to get away from it all. You look at the road stretching out from the village, the Tokaido or the Nakasendo. It looks like freedom, a path to the big city. But you know that every few miles there is a barrier, a checkpoint, and if you try to cross it without the right piece of wood in your hand, you might find your journey ending very abruptly at the end of a spear. You are walking along a wide, well-maintained dirt avenue lined with towering pine trees. To your left, the majestic cone of Mount Fuji rises snow-capped and perfect against the blue sky. To your right, the ocean glitters. It looks like a woodblock print come to life, and that's because you are standing inside the inspiration for Utagawa Hiroshige's famous series, The 53 Stations of the Tokaido. This is the Tokaido Road, the Eastern Sea Route. It is the jugular vein of feudal Japan, connecting the imperial capital of Kyoto in the west to the shogun's powerhouse of Edo in the east. It is vibrant, bustling, and undeniably scenic. You see pilgrims in white robes ringing bells, merchants leading pack horses laden with tea, and messengers running half-naked with letters in a split-toed sprint. It feels like freedom, the open road, the wind in your hair. But then the road narrows, the chatter of the travelers dies down. Ahead, you see a formidable wooden gate blocking the entire path, flanked by stone walls and bristling with weaponry. The pine trees stop, replaced by fences of spiked bamboo. You have reached a sekisho, a checkpoint, and suddenly, that wind in your hair feels a lot like the cold breath of the police state on the back of your neck. Traveling in feudal Japan is not a right. It is a privilege, and a highly regulated one at that. You cannot just pack a bag and go find yourself. You need papers. Specifically, you need a tagata, a wooden or paper travel permit, essentially an internal passport. Without this, you are not a traveler. You are a vagrant, a spy, or a criminal. You join the queue of nervous travelers. The atmosphere here is heavy. The officials manning the checkpoint aren't the bored TSA agents of the modern world who just want to confiscate your water bottle. These are serious men armed with sasumata, scary-looking polearms with a U-shaped metal fork at the end, designed to catch a person by the neck or limbs and pin them to the ground or a wall. They are looking for two things specifically. There is a famous phrase that defined the security policy of the Edo period: iritepo de onna, incoming guns, outgoing women. The shogunate was paranoid, and frankly they had reason to be. They had unified the country after a century of bloody civil war, and they intended to keep it that way. Their biggest fear was a rebellion by the powerful feudal lords, the daimyo. To prevent this, they instituted the Sankan Kotai system, requiring these lords to live in Edo for alternate years. Crucially, the lords had to leave their wives and children in Edo permanently as hostages. So incoming guns meant they were checking for weapons being smuggled into Edo to arm a coup. Outgoing women meant they were checking for high-ranking hostages trying to escape out of Edo to return to their home provinces. If you are a man, the inspection is rigorous but manageable. They check your tegada. This document is a bureaucratic masterpiece. It doesn't just say your name, it describes you. Medium height, round face, mole on the left cheek, missing a tooth. Since photography doesn't exist, your face is cross-referenced against the written description. If you grew a beard since you left home or got a scar, you have some explaining to do. They might interrogate you about your temple affiliation. Everyone had to be registered with a Buddhist temple, and your business. If you stutter or look too sweaty, you might be detained, but if you are a woman, the experience is a nightmare. You watch a woman ahead of you being pulled out of the line. She is led into a separate building. She isn't inspected by the male guards, but by an Aradam Ana, literally woman for inspecting new things, but functionally an old woman employed by the shogunate specifically to examine female travelers. The inspection is invasive. They aren't just checking her papers, they are checking her gender, her status, and her potential disguises. They might let down her hair to check for hidden messages or weapons. In strict cases, the examination involves checking for calluses on the hands and feet. Why? Because a noblewoman kept as a hostage in Edo would have soft hands, while a commoner servant would have rough hands. If a woman claiming to be a farmer's wife has hands as smooth as silk, the alarm bells ring. She is dragged away for interrogation. This focus on controlling the movement of women is a stark reminder of the era's politics. The bodies of women were the collateral for the peace of the nation. It's a heavy realization as you stand there clutching your own wooden pass. Let's say you are a commoner male. You step up. The official glares at you. You present your tegada. It was issued by your village headman and countersigned by your temple priest. It basically says, this is name, a peasant of village. He is going on a pilgrimage to Ise Shrine and will return. The Ise pilgrimage, O Ise Mary, was the great loophole of the era. Travel for tourism was technically frowned upon for peasants. You should be farming, not sightseeing. But travel for religion? That was hard to forbid. Millions of people, sometimes entire villages, would suddenly claim a religious calling to visit the grand shrine of Ise. It became a mass movement, a pilgrimage fever. It was the one excuse that the paranoid bureaucracy had to accept. The guard scrutinizes your mole. He looks at the paper. He looks at your mole again. He grunts. He hands the wood back to you. You are free to pass. You hurry through the heavy wooden gates, trying not to look back. But what if you didn't have a pass? What if you lost it, or you were fleeing a crime? You might be tempted to go around. The mountains surrounding the checkpoints were wild and dense. Surely you could just bushwhack a few miles to the north and bypass the gate. This is called Sekisho Yabari, breaking the checkpoint. Here is the mainstream historical fact that keeps you on the road. Sekisho Yabari was a capital offense. If you were caught sneaking around the checkpoint, the punishment wasn't a fine or a night in jail. It was crucifixion. The authorities would execute you and display your body near the checkpoint as a grim billboard for other would-be hikers. The locals living near the checkpoints were also incentivized to rat you out. If they caught a checkpoint breaker, they got a reward. If they let one pass and were found out, the whole village got punished. So the forest has eyes. However, historians still argue about the true porosity of these borders. While the laws were draconian on paper, the reality was often, you guessed it, complex. There is evidence of local guides who knew the secret paths, Nukumichi, and would smuggle travelers past the checkpoints for a fee. It was a risky underground economy. There were also certain times of day or certain lax officials that made sneaking easier. Some historians suggest that for commoners who weren't politically dangerous hostages, the guards often turned a blind eye to minor discrepancies if a small bribe was offered. But do you want to risk crucifixion on the hunch that the guard is feeling bribable today? Probably not. Once you clear the checkpoint, the atmosphere lightens again. You are now officially in a different province. You stop at a tea house, a chaya. On the other side, you sit on a bench covered with a red cloth and order dango, chewy rice dumplings on a stick covered in sweet soy glaze. and a cup of green tea. You watch the other travelers who made it through. A group of wandering monks, komuso, walk by. They are playing bamboo flutes, shakuhachi, and wearing basket-like wicker hats that completely cover their heads, hiding their faces. You stare at them. These basket monks are a fascinating fringe element of travel. Technically, they are Zen Buddhist monks of the Fugue sect. Their basket hats symbolize their detachment from the ego and the world. But because their faces are hidden and they have the right to travel freely, the disguise became a favorite for spies, masterless samurai, ronin, and fugitives. That monk playing the flute might be a devout holy man, or he might be an assassin on a mission. You can never tell. You finish your tea. The sugar and caffeine give you a boost. You have miles to go before you reach the next station, or shukuba. These post towns are spaced out at intervals of a day's walk. They are the service plazas of the Edo period, offering inns, stables, food, and entertainment. As you resume walking, the sun begins to set. The pine trees cast long, jagged shadows across the road. You have navigated the bureaucracy of the barrier, but now you have to navigate the logistics of the night. Where will you sleep? And more importantly, who else is sleeping there? The inns are crowded. You will likely be sharing a room with strangers. The concept of a private hotel room is a luxury of the future. You will be sleeping on the floor next to a snoring merchant and a pilgrim who hasn't bathed in 3 days. But for now, you just walk. The rhythm of the road takes over. Left foot, right foot. Waraji's sandals crunching on gravel. You are a tiny, documented, inspected particle flowing through the bloodstream of a country that is obsessed with order. You are safe as long as you stay on the path, keep your papers dry, and never, ever look like a woman trying to leave town. You have made it through the checkpoint, perhaps finding a cramped spot on the floor of a roadside inn to sleep, or maybe you have finally returned to your drafty paper house in the village. You close the sliding door, lock the wooden latch, and let out a long sigh. The world of samurai, tax collectors, and checkpoint guards is outside. You are inside. You are safe. Wrong. In feudal Japan, there is no such thing as minding your own business. In fact, minding your own business is practically a crime. You are about to be introduced to the ultimate social network, not one designed for sharing cat photos, but one designed for mutual surveillance and collective punishment. This is the Gonin Gumi, the 5-person group, or strictly speaking, 5-household group. You sit down for a meeting. It's not a casual neighborhood mixer. It is a mandatory legal assembly. You look around the circle. There is the rice farmer next door who snores too loud. There is the widow who sells tofu. There is the young couple who just moved in. And there is the grumpy old man who hates everyone, including yourself. This makes 5 households. Congratulations. You are now legally fused together. In the eyes of the shogunate, you are not 5 separate families. You are a single organism, and if one part of the organism gets an infection, the government amputates the whole thing. This is the system of Renza, or collective responsibility. It is one of the most effective and terrifying tools of social control ever invented. Here is the mainstream historical fact that keeps you awake at night. If the rice farmer next door decides to rob a merchant, he gets punished. But you get punished too. If the young couple flees the village to avoid paying their taxes, a desperate act called yonage, or night flight, the remaining 4 families in the group have to cover their unpaid taxes. If the widow is secretly a Christian, a religion banned under penalty of death, and you didn't report her, you are all executed. Suddenly, your relationship with your neighbors changes. You aren't just borrowing a cup of sugar. You are conducting a constant, low-level risk assessment of their moral character. That friendly wave you give them in the morning, it's actually a welfare check to make sure they haven't done anything illegal during the night. You watch the group leader, the Kumigashira, unfurl a long scroll. This is the Gonin Gumi Register. It is a dense contract filled with rules that govern every aspect of your life. Every year, the head of each household has to sign this blood oath. You listen as the rules are read aloud. They are exhaustively specific. You must report any suspicious strangers. You must not gamble. You must not let your fields go fallow. You must not wear clothes above your station. Remember the sumptuary laws? You must ensure everyone in your group is hardworking and obedient. And then comes the heaviest clause, the religious inquisition. The shogunate was obsessed with stamping out Christianity, which they viewed as a subversive tool of foreign imperialism. The Gonin Gumi was the frontline defense. You have to swear in writing that none of your neighbors are Kirishitain. If a hidden Christian is discovered in your group later, and it turns out you signed that paper claiming they weren't, well, let's just say the government's response won't be a strongly worded letter. This creates a fringe psychological state that historians find fascinating. It turned every single citizen into a spy for the government. There was no need for a massive police force or CCTV cameras because the state had deputized the entire population. Your neighbor isn't just your friend, he is your parole officer, and you are his. Imagine the tension. You see the rice farmer purchase a new tool. It looks expensive. Your stomach drops. Did he steal it? If he did, do you report him? If you report him, he gets arrested, and you lose a neighbor and a worker. But if you don't report him, and the official police catch him, you go to jail with him for negligence of supervision. It's a prisoner's dilemma played out in real time, every single day. There is a quirky administrative tool that facilitates this constant communication, the Kairenban. This is a wooden clipboard or a circulating notice board. The village headman writes a notice, maybe a new tax rule, a festival schedule, or a wanted poster for a criminal. He passes it to the first house in the Gonin Gumi. You receive the Kairenban from the grumpy old man. You have to read it, or have it read to you, if you are illiterate, though literacy rates in Edo, Japan were surprisingly high. Then, you have to stamp your seal, your hanko, on it to prove you saw it. Then you physically walk it to the next neighbor. If the board stops at your house because you forgot to pass it on, you are breaking the chain of command. The system relies on this physical relay. It forces interaction. You can't just text "seen." You have to look your neighbor in the eye and hand them the law. Historians still argue about the long-term social impact of this system. One camp argues that the Gonin Gumi destroyed genuine social trust, creating a surveillance society of paranoia where everyone wore a mask of polite obedience while secretly fearing their friends. The other camp suggests it actually created incredibly strong community bonds. Because your fate was tied to your neighbors, you had to help them. If the widow was sick and couldn't work her field, you didn't help her out of charity. You helped her because if she couldn't pay her tax, you had to pay it. It enforced a kind of mandatory altruism. Whether it was fear or friendship, the result was a society with incredibly low crime rates. Who would dare commit a crime when 4 other families are watching your every move, terrified that your mistake will destroy their lives? Let's play out a scenario. It is late at night. You hear a noise next door, a heavy thud like a bag being dropped, then hushed voices. Your heart hammers against your ribs. Is it a thief? Is it a secret lover? Or is your neighbor packing to flee? If they flee, the Yonage scenario, you are in deep trouble. The tax debt falls on you. You have to investigate. You slide open your window a crack. You peer out into the darkness. You are tired. You just want to sleep. But the Gonengumi system demands vigilance. You see a shadow moving in your neighbor's yard. You have a split-second decision. Do you call out? Do you wake the other neighbors? Or do you wait? You decide to clear your throat loudly. The shadow freezes. Then a voice whispers back, "Sorry, just dropped a pumpkin." You exhale. It was just a pumpkin, this time. But the anxiety lingers. This system means you can never truly relax. You are responsible for the morality and financial solvency of 4 other households. You are your brother's keeper, whether you like your brother or not. And it's not just the government laws. The village itself has its own weapon for those who disrupt the harmony, Mura Hachibu. This is the ultimate social cancellation. If you annoy the village, maybe you refuse to help with the harvest, or you are constantly rude, or you break the unwritten rules, the village council can declare Mura Hachibu. This translates to 8 parts ostracism. Traditional village life has 10 parts of social interaction. Coming-of-age ceremonies, weddings, childbirth, care for the sick, funerals, building renovations, flood control, firefighting, religious festivals, and anniversaries. When you are struck with Mura Hachibu, the village cuts you off from 8 of these. They won't come to your wedding. They won't help you birth your baby. They won't talk to you. You are a ghost. The only 2 things they will help you with are firefighting and funerals. Why? Because a fire at your house threatens their houses, and a rotting corpse at your house smells bad and spreads disease. They help you only when your disaster physically endangers them. Otherwise, you are dead to them. For a Japanese villager whose entire identity is wrapped up in the group, this is a fate worse than death. It is total isolation in a crowded room. So you sit in the circle, listening to the leader drone on about the prohibition of gambling. You nod enthusiastically. You smile at your neighbors. You stamp your seal on the register. You promise to be good, and more importantly, you promise to make sure they are good. The meeting ends. You bow to everyone. Otsukare-sama desu. Thank you for your hard work. You walk back to your home. You look at the paper walls again. They are thin. They let in the colds. But now you realize they also let in the judgment. Every sound you make, every argument you have with your spouse is being logged by the ears next door. Not because they are nosy, but because their lives depend on you being a boring, law-abiding citizen. You crawl back under your futon, the weight of the collective responsibility pressing down on you heavier than the cotton quilt. You drift off, hoping that the neighbor's dog doesn't bark and violate a noise ordinance, because you really don't want to explain that to the magistrate tomorrow. But hey, at least you have your health, right? Well, about that, you feel a twinge in your stomach. Maybe that millet from breakfast was a bit old, or maybe it's the stress. You might need a doctor, and if you thought the police state was scary, wait until you see the medical kit.
You wake up, but the familiar ache in your back from the rice planting has been joined by a new, more urgent discomfort. Your stomach is churning. Perhaps that millet from yesterday wasn't quite fermented enough. Or maybe the stress of the Gumi meeting has tied your intestines into a knot. In feudal Japan, illness isn't just a physical inconvenience. It is often seen as a spiritual imbalance, a disruption of your ki, life energy, or simply bad luck. Whatever the cause, you need a professional. You trudge down the street to the home of the kusushi, the doctor. Do not expect a sterile waiting room with old magazines. You are entering a space that smells intensely of earth, dried roots, and something vaguely burnt. The doctor is likely an older man, dressed somberly, sitting amongst an array of wooden drawers and ceramic jars. Diagnosis here is an art form. There are no stethoscopes or blood tests. The doctor beckons you to sit. He takes your wrist. Silence falls over the room. He is performing Miyaku Shin, pulse diagnosis. In traditional Kampo medicine, the Japanese adaptation of traditional Chinese medicine, the pulse is the window to the soul. He isn't just counting beats per minute. He is listening for the texture of the pulse. Is it floating? Is it slippery? Is it wiry like a guitar string? He closes his eyes, drifting into a meditative state to read the river of your blood. It is a surprisingly soothing experience until he opens his eyes and prescribes the treatment. Your Kai is stagnant, he announces. We must apply heat. He reaches for a small bag of fluffy, dried brownish stuff. This is magusa, or mugwort. You are about to experience okyu, or moxibustion. He tells you to roll up your kimono. He finds a specific pressure point on your skin, perhaps on your leg or your back, that corresponds to your stomach, according to the complex map of meridians. He takes a pinch of the mugwort, rolls it into a tiny cone the size of a grain of rice, and places it directly on your skin. And then, he lights it on fire. You watch the tiny ember glow orange. At first, it feels pleasant, a focused point of warmth. Then, as the ember burns down to the skin, the warmth sharpens into a needle prick of intense heat. You wince. The doctor brushes the ash away, leaving a small red mark. In many cases, this leaves a permanent scar. In fact, in the Edo period, having okyu scars on your legs was as common as having a vaccination scar on your arm today. It was a sign that you took care of your health. There is a fringe cultural tidbit here that persists even today. Okyu wasn't just for illness, it was for discipline. Naughty children were often threatened with, "If you don't behave, I'll give you okyu." The fear of that tiny burning cone kept many a rebellious toddler in line. It was a multi-purpose tool, curing stomach aches and correcting bad attitudes with the same thermal shock. After the heat comes the liquid courage. The doctor turns to his wall of drawers, the Hayakumi Dansu, chest of 100 flavors. He starts pulling out ingredients. Ginseng, licorice root, ginger, cinnamon bark. Those sound okay. But then he adds ground rhinoceros horn, dried gecko, or perhaps shakuyaku, peony root. He wraps this potpourri in a paper packet and hands it to you. You have to take this home and boil it in an earthenware pot to create a senjigusuri, a decoction. The smell that fills your small house is distinctive. It's thick, bitter, and heavy. It smells like the floor of a forest that has been concentrated into a soup. You pour the dark, muddy liquid into a bowl. You drink. It is unbelievably bitter. The concept of sugar-coating medicine hasn't really caught on yet. In fact, the bitterness is part of the cure. The shock to your taste buds is believed to help stimulate the body's response. You shudder as the liquid goes down, but strangely, the warmth radiating from your stomach feels grounding. Mainstream historians note that Kampo medicine was incredibly sophisticated. It wasn't just superstition. Many of the herbs used, like mahung, ephedra, contain powerful active compounds that are the basis for modern decongestants and asthma drugs. The doctors of Edo were empirical scientists, meticulously recording what worked and what didn't over centuries of trial and error. However, there is an open scholarly debate about the placebo effect in this era. Did the dried gecko tails actually chemically cure the patient? Or did the elaborate ritual, the pulse reading, the burning mugwort, the terrible taste, convince the mind to heal the body? Some argue that the theatricality of the medicine was just as important as the chemistry. If you couldn't afford the town doctor, you waited for the kusuri uri, the traveling medicine peddler. These were the door-to-door salesmen of the feudal world, often coming from the Toyama region, which is still famous for pharmaceuticals today. They carried a large, multi-tiered backpack wrapped in cloth. They operated on a fascinating business model called okigusuri, use first, pay later. The peddler would leave a box of medicines at your house for free. He would come back 6 months or a year later, check which packets you had used, and charge you only for those. It was an honor system that built immense customer loyalty. You might buy their famous hanguntan, a cure-all pill for stomach aches, or perhaps something more esoteric like dragon horn powder for a cough. The packaging was beautiful, colorful woodblock prints of tigers and deities promising miraculous recoveries. But let's talk about the weirdest cure you might encounter: the Neidabotoki, or rubbing Buddha. If the herbs didn't work, you might drag yourself to a specific temple. There, you would find a statue of a deity, often Binzuru, Pindola. The statue is smooth and worn shiny. The belief is simple. If your stomach hurts, you rub the stomach of the statue and then rub your own stomach. You transfer the healing power. You watch people lining up to rub the statue. It's a touching scene of shared hope. Germ theory suggests this is a terrible idea. Hundreds of sick people touching the same spot and then touching themselves. But the psychological comfort is undeniable. Back in your room, the okyu burn is throbbing slightly, and the bitter taste of the herbs lingers on your tongue. But your stomach actually feels a bit better. Maybe it was the ginger, maybe it was the heat, or maybe it was just the relief that the doctor didn't prescribe something worse, like fresh liver of a criminal, which was a real, though rare, fringe rumor for treating tuberculosis. You lie back down. You are tired. The physical toll of this life is immense. You are planting in mud, eating rough grains, freezing in paper houses, and burning your skin to cure your belly. You are realizing that the human body in this era is a tool, and like any tool, it requires constant, rough maintenance. But as you drift off, a new sound catches your ear. Not the silence of the village, but a distant, frantic bell ringing. And the smell? It's not the mugwort anymore. It's sharper. Smoke. You sit bolt upright. In a city made of wood and paper where people cook on open fires and light their nights with oil lamps, there is one word that strikes more terror than tax collector or samurai. Kaji. Fire. You scramble to your feet. The medicine is forgotten. The flowers of Edo are blooming, and that is a poetic way of saying your neighborhood is about to burn down. The smell of burning mugwort from the doctor's office is suddenly overwhelmed by a scent that triggers a primal panic in every living creature. Raw, acrid wood smoke. And it's not coming from a cooking hearth, it's coming from the neighborhood. Then comes the sound. Clang, clang, clang. It is the hansho, the fire bell atop the local watchtower. The rhythm tells you everything. A slow, spaced beating means a distant fire. A frantic, continuous hammering means the fire is close. Tonight, the hammer is blurring against the bronze. It is close. You scramble out of your house into the street. The night sky, usually a deep indigo void, is glowing with a bruised, pulsing orange light. Sparks are drifting on the wind like angry fireflies, landing on the thatched and shingled roofs around you. In a city built almost entirely of paper, wood, and straw, a stray spark is not an accident. It is a seed of destruction. This is the terror and the spectacle of the Kaji. Fires were so frequent in the capital that the locals, with a mix of dark humor and resignation, called them the flowers of Edo. They bloomed suddenly, bright and hot, and withered just as fast, leaving nothing but ash. It was said that fires and fights are the flowers of Edo. You are about to witness the garden in full bloom. People are streaming out of the Nagia row houses. There is panic, yes, but it is a practiced, orderly panic. Everyone knows the drill. You don't try to save everything. You grab the essentials. The ihai, mortuary tablets of your ancestors, your cash box, and perhaps your bedding. Everything else is abandoned. Furniture is heavy. Life is light. You see people throwing chests onto their backs and running toward the designated fire breaks or the river. But running toward the flames are the heroes of the night. You hear them before you see them, a raucous chanting, the stomping of feet, and the heavy thud of wooden tools. The Hikeshi, the fire brigades. If samurai are the authority figures of the day, the Hikeshi are the rock stars. They are rough, rowdy, and incredibly brave. Many are construction workers by day, stevedores or scaffolders. They wear thick, multi-layered cotton coats called hantan, soaked in water to make them fire-resistant, for a few minutes at least. On their heads, they wear leather hoods. And underneath, many of them sport elaborate full-body tattoos, dragons, carp, legendary heroes. In a society where tattoos were often associated with criminals, the firefighters wore them as a badge of toughness, a second skin of mystical protection against the heat. You press yourself against a wall to let a brigade pass. They aren't carrying hoses. They aren't carrying buckets of water. This is the mainstream historical fact that baffles the modern mind. Japanese firefighting wasn't about putting the fire out. It was about tearing the city down. The technology to pump water at high pressure simply didn't exist. Throwing a bucket of water on a raging inferno in a wooden city was like spitting on a volcano. So their strategy was purely defensive demolition. They used tobiguchi, long wooden poles with a metal hook on the end. You watch them swarm a building next to the burning one. They hook the beams, the pillars, the roof. With a coordinated shout, "Ay-ya," they pull. The house creates a sickening crunch and collapses into a pile of lumber. They are creating a fire break. They are sacrificing the healthy limb to save the body. If your house is next to the fire but not yet burning, I have bad news for you. The firemen are going to destroy it anyway, and you can't stop them. It is the law of the flowers. But the most mesmerizing figure in this chaotic dance is the standard bearer, the Meitoi Mochi. High up on a roof, silhouetted against the roaring flames, stands a man holding a massive white geometric standard, the Meitoi. It looks like a giant paper lantern or a stylized sculpture on a pole. It weighs upwards of 20 kilograms, 45 pounds. The bearer wears it like a flag. His job is insane. He stands on the roof of a burning building, or the one right next to it, to signal, "This is where we hold the line." He marks the territory for his brigade. It is a point of immense pride. He spins the matoi to keep the streamers flying, signaling to the other firefighters below where to focus their demolition. As long as the matoi is there, the firefighters will not retreat. This is the fringe tidbit that defines the bravado of the era. The matoi bearer would often refuse to come down until his coat started smoking or the roof literally gave way beneath him. It was a game of chicken with the fire. If another brigade's standard got closer to the fire than yours, your brigade lost face. Fights between rival fire brigades were common, sometimes breaking out in the middle of the actual fire. They would literally be punching each other while the city burned, arguing over who got the honor of tearing down the feudal lord's mansion. You watch the sparks swirl around the man on the roof. He looks like a demon or a god, illuminated by the orange hellscape. The heat is intense, radiating across the street, drying your eyes and stinging your skin. The roar of the fire is deafening, sounding like a living thing, a giant beast inhaling the city. Historians still argue about the economic impact of these fires. The scrap and build theory suggests that the constant destruction actually fueled the Edo economy. Because the city had to be rebuilt every few years, there was always work for carpenters, lumber merchants, plasterers, and tatami makers. Wealth was constantly being redistributed from the hoarders, who lost their mansions, to the workers, who built them back. It was a disastrous form of Keynesian stimulus, centuries before Keynes was born. Money didn't stagnate. It circulated, carried on the back of smoke. But standing there, watching a family's home turn into a bonfire, the economic theory feels cold. You see a woman clutching a kimono, watching her shop collapse under the hooks of the firemen. It is a tragedy. Yet, there is no wailing. There is a stoic acceptance. Shigata ga nai. It cannot be helped. The wind shifts. The fire brigade has successfully dropped a row of houses, creating a gap of rubble. The flames lick at the empty air, find no fuel, and begin to rage impotently against the sky. The Matoi bearer finally jumps down, landing with a heavy thud, his coat steaming in the cool night air. The bell slows its rhythm. The immediate danger has passed. The dawn brings a gray, ash-covered reality. You walk through the charred neighborhood. The smell of wet charcoal is overpowering. But what shocks you is the speed of recovery. Before the embers are even fully cold, people are already marking out their plots with rope. Lumber merchants are arriving with carts of new wood, their prices mysteriously higher than yesterday. The city doesn't mourn, it rebuilds. A temporary shack goes up in a day. A shop opens for business on a mat spread over the ruins. You return to your own house. It was spared. You slide the door shut, wiping the soot from your face. You have survived the flower. But the adrenaline leaves you exhausted. The impermanence of this world feels heavy. Your house, your clothes, your life. It's all just paper and wood, waiting for a spark. This realization, the mujo, or transience of life, is a core part of the philosophy here. It's why the cherry blossom is loved. It falls while it is beautiful. It's why the fire is a flower. It makes you appreciate the safety of the indoors, the quiet of the morning, the simple fact that you are still here. You decide you need a break from the intensity of survival. You need an escape, not a physical one. The checkpoint guards are too scary, but a mental one. You need to enter the floating world. You need to see a play. But be warned, entertainment in feudal Japan is not a quick 2-hour movie. It is an endurance sport. You leave the charred smell of the burnt neighborhood behind and head towards the river, crossing a bridge into a different universe. You are entering the ukiyo, the floating world. Originally, this Buddhist term meant sorrowful world, referring to the transient, suffering nature of earthly existence. But the irreverent, pleasure-seeking merchants of Edo flipped the pun. If life is fleeting and sorrowful, they argued, we might as well enjoy it while it lasts, floating like a gourd on a river current. Your destination is Saruwaka-cho, the theater district. As you approach, the vibe changes. The rigid social hierarchy of the samurai world seems to soften here. You see massive, colorful banners fluttering in the wind, announcing the names of the stars. The sound of drums and shamisen music bleeds out into the street. You are about to experience kabuki. Now, forget everything you know about going to the theater. This is not a polite 2-hour evening affair where you sit in silence and sip a microscopic glass of wine during intermission. This is a sunrise to sunset marathon. It is a festival. It is a contact sport. You buy your ticket, a wooden tally, and enter the theater. It is a cavernous wooden structure, smelling of sawdust, tobacco smoke, and humanity. There are no plush velvet seats. The floor is a grid of small, square wooden boxes called masu. Each box holds 4 people. You take off your sandals and squeeze into your designated square. It is intimate. You are sitting cross-legged, knees touching strangers. If you have claustrophobia, this is your personal hell. The play began hours ago at dawn. People come and go as they please. The atmosphere is chaotic. Vendors are crawling over the partitions between the boxes, selling tea, sake, and grilled skewers. People are smoking long pipes. Babies are crying. It feels less like Broadway and more like a rowdy baseball game. On stage, the visual assault is magnificent. The set design is elaborate, featuring revolving stages, a Japanese invention called the Mawari Butai, and trapdoors. The costumes are heavy with gold thread and embroidery, weighing upwards of 20 kilograms. You look at the actors. They are all men. This is the mainstream historical fact that everyone knows. Kabuki is an all-male art form. But the history behind it is a fringe tragicomedy of moral panic. Originally, in the early 1600s, kabuki was performed by women, ana kabuki. It was incredibly popular, partly because the dancing was sensual and the actresses were often available for after-hours companionship. The shogunate, hating the disorder and the prostitution, banned women from the stage in 1629. So the theaters switched to young boys, wakashu kabuki. The government realized that the samurai were now fighting over the young boys instead of the women. So they banned boys in 1652. Finally, the theater said, "Fine, we'll use grown men, and we'll shave their foreheads to make them look less attractive." This was Yaro Kabuki, men's kabuki, and it stuck. This led to the creation of the onagata, male actors who specialize in female roles. You watch an onagata on stage now. The transformation is eerie. It's not just the makeup or the wig, it's the movement. The actor has spent his entire life studying the essence of femininity, the slope of the shoulders, the way the knees turn in, the tilt of the neck. Historians still argue about the cultural impact of this gender performance. Some suggest that the onagata became the ultimate fashion icons for real women in Edo, creating a bizarre feedback loop where women were imitating men who were imitating women. Suddenly, a shout erupts from the audience right next to your ear. "Nakamuraya!" You jump. You think a fight is breaking out. But then someone else yells, "Matamashita! We've been waiting for you." This is kakago, the art of shouting at the actors. It is not heckling, it is praise. Experienced fans know exactly when to shout the actor's house name, Yago, to heighten the dramatic tension. It usually happens when the actor strikes a mi, a dramatic pose. Watch closely. The lead actor freezes. He crosses his eyes, one in, one out, snaps his head, and holds the pose. The wooden clappers, suke, slam against a board. Bat, bat, bat. The action stops. The camera zooms in, mentally. This is the me. It's the equivalent of a comic book splash page or a beat drop in a song. The audience goes wild. If you don't shout, the actor might feel unappreciated. But the most mind-bending part of the stagecraft is the invisible men. You see figures dressed head to toe in black, with black hoods covering their faces, scurrying around the stage behind the actors. They are handing them props, rearranging the train of a kimono, or removing a teacup. These are the kurogo. By convention, they are invisible. The audience collectively agrees to ignore them. It's a suspension of disbelief that is uniquely Japanese. If a kurogo is doing his job right, you don't see a man in black. You just see a prop floating into the actor's hand like magic. It's the original practical effect. By noon, your stomach is growling. Fortunately, kabuki gave the world a culinary invention, the makunuchi bento. Makunuchi literally means between the curtains. It was a boxed lunch designed to be eaten quickly during the intermission when the curtain was down. You open your lacquered box. It's a grid of bite-sized delights. Small rice balls sprinkled with sesame, a piece of grilled fish, a slice of rolled omelet, tamagoyaki, and some simmered vegetables. It's designed to be eaten with chopsticks without making a mess on your kimono. You eat while discussing the plot with the stranger next to you. "The lovers are going to commit double suicide, aren't they?" he asks, chewing a piece of burdock root. "Oh, absolutely," you reply. "It's a chikamatsu play. Everyone dies." The plays are often ripped from the headlines. If a real-life shopkeeper and a courtesan committed a scandalous suicide pact last month, you can bet there is a kabuki play about it this month. It was the tabloid news of the era, dramatized and elevated to high art. Suddenly, action erupts behind you. You twist around. A pathway runs from the back of the theater right through the audience to the stage. This is the hanamichi, the flower path. An actor charges down this walkway, literally parting the sea of spectators. He is inches from you. You can see the sweat on his face, the intricate lines of his kumadori makeup, red stripes for heroes, blue for villains. The energy is electric. This physical connection, the breaking of the fourth wall, makes the drama feel immediate and dangerous. The play drags on into the late afternoon. The endurance required to sit in a small box for 8 hours is significant. Your legs are numb. The air is thick with smoke. But the story has hooked you. It's a melodrama of duty, giri, versus human emotion, ninjo. The samurai wants to marry the girl, but duty says he must kill her father, or something equally tragic. As the sun begins to set, the theater grows darker. Oil lamps are lit. The shadows on the actors' faces deepen, making their expressions more grotesque and dramatic. The final scene approaches. The villain is defeated. usually in a spectacular, slow-motion fight scene called a tachimawari, which is more like a dance than a brawl. The hero strikes one last me. The clappers go wild. The curtain falls. You stumble out of the theater into the twilight. Your ears are ringing from the drums. Your eyes are dazzled by the colors. You feel emotionally drained but culturally enriched. You walk back through the streets of Edo. The lanterns are being lit. The city is transforming again. The bustling energy of the day is fading, replaced by the shadows of the night. And in those shadows, the rational world of merchants and samurai begins to dissolve. You see, in feudal Japan, the night is not just dark, it is populated. As you walk past a willow tree near a canal, a cold breeze hits the back of your neck. You remember the stories, the yokai, the spirits. You quicken your pace. You might have survived the fire and the samurai, but are you ready to face the things that go bump in the dark? You step away from the fading glow of the theater district and turn toward home. As the sounds of the drums and the cheering crowds die out behind you, you are confronted with a physical reality that the modern world has effectively banished. True, absolute darkness. In our age of light pollution, where the sky is a permanent murky gray and streetlights hum on every corner, we have forgotten what the night actually looks like. In feudal Japan, once the sun goes down, the world simply disappears. Unless there is a full moon, the streets are swallowed by an ink-black void. You are carrying a shoshin, a collapsible paper lantern with a small candle inside. It casts a feeble, wavering sphere of light, barely illuminating your own feet. Beyond that 3-foot radius, nothing. And in that nothing, your mind begins to populate the shadows. This is the golden age of the yokai. These aren't just monsters in the Western sense of Dracula or a werewolf. They are supernatural phenomena, explanations for the unexplainable, and manifestations of the natural world's weirdness. The Japanese night is crowded. As you walk along the bank of a canal, you instinctively tighten your grip on your lantern handle. You keep your distance from the water's edge. This isn't just because you don't want to fall in, it's because of what lives down there. The kappa. You've probably heard of them. Green, turtle-like humanoids with beaks and shells. Mainstream history books will tell you they are water deities or imps. But the practical advice for a traveler is oddly specific. If you encounter a kappa, you shouldn't run. You should bow. Why? Because the kappa has a saucer-like depression on top of its head that holds water. This water is the source of its power. If it bows back to you out of politeness, and they are strangely polite creatures, the water spills out, and it becomes paralyzed. It's a self-defeating anatomy. But there is a fringe, slightly terrifying tidbit about why the kappa attacks you. It's not just trying to drown you, it's looking for something very specific, the shirikodama. In Edo folklore, there was a belief that a small mystical ball called the shirikodama, literally small anus ball, existed inside the human colon. It was thought to be the physical anchor of the soul. The kappa's favorite hobby was extracting this ball through the back door. So, if you are walking near a river at night and you feel a sudden chill, you might instinctively protect your rear assets. This specific fear led to the custom of throwing cucumbers into the river. Kappa love cucumbers more than they love human souls. So, you bribe them. Here, have a vegetable. Please leave my colon alone. It's a transaction. You hurry past the canal, listening to the wind rustling the bamboo. It sounds like whispering, sasa sasa sasa. You enter a wooded area near a shrine. A small blue flame flickers in the distance. It hovers, splits into two, then vanishes. Kitsunebi. Foxfire. Foxes, or kitsune, are not just animals here. They are highly intelligent shapeshifters and messengers of the rice god Inari, but they are also tricksters. Stories abound of travelers who thought they were spending the night in a luxurious mansion, being served a feast by a beautiful woman, only to wake up the next morning covered in leaves, eating horse manure, lying in the middle of a graveyard. The fox had bewitched them. Then there is the tanuki, the raccoon dog. If the fox is the cunning illusionist, the tanuki is the jolly drunken prankster. You might see statues of them today outside restaurants, sporting round bellies and large straw hats. But in the old stories, their shape-shifting ability centered around a very specific PG-13 part of their anatomy. Their scrotums. I'm serious. Ancient woodblock prints depict tanuki stretching their magical scrotums to the size of tatami mats to use as blankets, raincoats, or even drums to beat out a rhythm in the night. It's not sexual, it's just versatile biological utility. The pompoko sound you hear in the woods? That's a tanuki drumming on its belly, or elsewhere. It adds a layer of surreal humor to the terror of the dark. But it's not just animals. In this era, if an object is used for 100 years, it gains a soul. It becomes a tsukumogami. That old paper umbrella you threw away? It might come back as a kasa obake, an umbrella with one eye, one leg, and a long tongue, hopping around to lick your face. Your old sandals? They might start chanting in the night. This belief instilled a deep sense of respect for tools and objects. You didn't just throw things away, you thanked them for their service, or you performed a memorial service for broken needles and old brushes. It was an animistic form of recycling enforced by the fear that your trash might come back to haunt you. As you walk, the silence of the village feels heavy. You are entering the Ushimitsu Doki, the hour of the ox, roughly between 2 a.m. and 2:30 a.m. This is when the veil between the worlds is thinnest. This is when the Hyaki Yako occurs, the night parade of 100 demons. Imagine a silent, chaotic procession of every monster imaginable marching through the street. If you look at them, you die. So the smart traveler keeps their eyes on the ground. But why were these stories so prevalent? Historians still argue whether the explosion of yokai culture in the Edo period was a form of genuine, superstitious dread or a sophisticated form of urban entertainment. On one hand, people were genuinely afraid of the dark. On the other hand, yokai became mascots. They were printed on trading cards, featured in kabuki plays, and used in children's games. This debate centers on the Hykumonogatari Kaidenkai, a gathering of 100 supernatural tales. This was the ultimate test of courage. People would gather in a room at night, light 100 candles, specifically in blue paper lanterns, and take turns telling ghost stories. After each story, they would blow out one candle. The room would get darker and darker. The belief was that when the final candle was extinguished, a real spirit would appear. The tension as the room faded from 100 lights to one must have been excruciating. Yet, it was a wildly popular party game. Was it a ritual to summon the dead? Or was it just the feudal equivalent of watching a slasher movie with your friends to get an adrenaline rush? It suggests that the people of Edo, bored by the strict peace and bureaucracy of their daily lives, craved a little bit of manufactured chaos. You finally spot your own house in the distance. The relief is palpable. You slide the door open, gara, and step into the genkin. You notice a small pile of salt placed in a cone shape on the ground near the door. This is Mauricio. Salt is a purifier in the Shinto religion. It keeps the bad spirits out and invites good fortune in. You are careful not to kick it. You need all the protection you can get. You extinguish your lantern. The smell of the burnt wick fills the entryway. You are back in the safety of your home, but the sounds of the night, the wind, the creaking wood, the distant bark of a dog, or is it a fox, suddenly seem much louder. You crawl into your futon, pulling the covers up high. You try to rationalize the noises. That scratching sound? Just a rat? That drip of water? Just the rain. It's definitely not a kappa looking for his lost water dish. You close your eyes, trying to drift off. But then you remember the next hurdle. You are safe from the monsters, yes. But tomorrow morning, you have to deal with something far more terrifying than a demon. You have to deal with the samurai bureaucracy again. But this time, it's not about bowing on the road. It's about the fact that you, a commoner, might have a dispute. And entering the legal system of feudal Japan is a journey from which few emerge with their dignity or their fingernails intact. The sun rises, burning off the mist and banishing the kappa and the fox spirits back to the shadows. You survive the night, and with the daylight comes a shift in perspective. You have spent this journey dodging samurai on the road and fearing their authority. But let's take a moment to step into their sandals. Imagine for a moment that you aren't the peasant planting rice or the merchant counting coins. Imagine you are the one wearing the two swords. You might think, finally, power, glory, cool sword fights. I hate to break it to you, but the life of a samurai in the Edo period is about 5% warrior and 95% underpaid office administrator. You wake up in a house that is slightly nicer than the peasants'. It has a gate at least, but inside it is sparsely furnished. You put on your uniform. The hakama pants are pleated and stiff. You slide the daisho, the two swords, into your obi. They are heavy. Carrying around 5 pounds of steel on your hip all day is terrible for your lower back. And here is the irony. You will likely never draw them in anger. During the 250 years of relative peace under the Tokugawa shogunate, the samurai class transformed from rough-and-tumble warriors into yakunin, civil servants. The job description shifted from taking heads to filing reports. You walk to the castle not to fight a siege, but to clock in. Your daily tasks involve checking the inventory of the castle storehouse, overseeing the repair of a bridge, or copying documents by hand. The weapon you use most often is not the katana. It is the yatari, a portable smoking pipe-shaped case holding a brush and ink. You are a warrior of the spreadsheet. And you are broke. Desperately, secretly broke. This is the great paradox of the era. The samurai were at the top of the social hierarchy, but their wealth was fixed in rice, koku. As the economy evolved and became cash-based, the merchants, who were at the bottom of the hierarchy, became incredibly wealthy, while the price of rice fluctuated and generally trended downward relative to the cost of living. You, the samurai, have to maintain the appearance of nobility. You have to buy the right clothes, maintain your armor, just in case, and employ servants. But your salary is stagnant. You are living in a gentile poverty. You might look down on the merchant you pass on the street, but you probably owe him a significant amount of money. This leads to the fascinating fringe reality of the samurai side hustle, or naishoku. To make ends meet without losing face, many low-ranking samurai took on piecework at home. If you peeked behind the dignified walls of a samurai compound, you might see the fierce warrior of the clan sitting on the floor, making umbrellas, or painting designs on lanterns, or assembling bird cages, or even raising goldfish or crickets to sell to pet shops. There is a famous phrase, "Bushi wa kuwanedo takayoji." A samurai uses a toothpick even when he hasn't eaten. It means pretending to be full and satisfied to maintain dignity, even when you are starving. You pick your teeth with a jaunty air while your stomach screams and your hands are stained with the glue from umbrella making. The pressure to conform is crushing. The Bushido Code isn't just about bravery, it's a straitjacket of etiquette. There are rules for how to walk, how to speak, how to accept a gift, and how to sleep. You must sleep in a way that allows you to spring instantly into action. Sleeping in a sprawling, comfortable mess is considered corpse-like and shameful. You are on duty even when you are unconscious. And then there is the ultimate bureaucracy of the blade, seppuku. In the West, this is often romanticized as a spontaneous act of honor. In reality, during the Edo period, it became a highly ritualized form of capital punishment and legal maneuvering. If a samurai committed a crime or failed in a duty, he might be ordered to commit seppuku. Why ordered? Because if he was executed as a criminal, his family lost their samurai status, their home, and their income. They would be destitute. But if he committed seppuku, he died as a warrior. His honor was preserved, and crucially, his family could often keep their inheritance. It was a grim bureaucratic plea deal. Die by your own hand, and we won't evict your wife and children. Historians still argue about the famous Akko incident, better known as the story of the 47 Ronin. When these masterless samurai avenged their lord and then were ordered to commit seppuku, was it the ultimate expression of loyalty, or was it a dangerous disruption of the public order? The shogunate debated this fiercely. If they praised the Ronin too much, they encouraged vigilantism. If they condemned them, they looked weak on honor. In the end, they compromised. They let them die as warriors, but they still made them die. It was a legal headache that became a legend. You sit at your desk in the castle, grinding ink. You look at the stack of paperwork regarding the tax yields from the millet-eating villagers. You look at your swords, resting on the rack. They are beautiful, lethal works of art, gathering dust. You realize that the grass isn't greener on this side of the wall. The peasant breaks his back in the mud. You break your spirit in the office. Both of you are trapped in a rigid cage of expectation. The sun begins to set, signaling the end of your shift. You pack up your brush. You walk out of the castle gates, bowing to the guards. You walk home, hoping your wife sold those umbrellas so you can buy some sake. You need it. As you walk, the tension of the day, the need to be perfect, the need to be stoic, begins to bleed away. You are just a man, walking under the rising moon. The wooden clogs of the city create a soft, rhythmic clatter that sounds like a heartbeat. The day is done. The struggle for status, for rice, for survival, is paused for a few hours. You reach your home. You take off the heavy swords. You feel physically lighter, almost floating. You are no longer a warrior or a farmer or a merchant. You are just a tired soul looking for rest. The floating world is quieting down. The fires are out. The ghosts are hiding. It is time to let go of the history. It is time to let the centuries fade into the background. You have survived the day in feudal Japan. Now, you deserve the reward. The day is finally, mercifully, over. You have navigated the freezing draft of morning, the pungent reality of the streets, the back-breaking labor of the rice paddies, the terror of the checkpoint, and the existential dread of the fire bell. You have walked in the shoes of the peasant and the sandals of the samurai. Now, the heavy curtain of the Edo night has fallen completely, wrapping the world in a silence that feels thick and velvety. You are back in your room. The oil lamp, the andon, flickers with a weak, warm light, casting long, dancing shadows against the paper walls. You watch the shadows sway. In this era, darkness is not something to be eliminated with a flick of a switch. It is a companion. It has depth and texture. The famous author Junichiro Tanizaki wrote about this in Praise of Shadows, arguing that Japanese aesthetics were built around this darkness, that gold leaf and lacquerware were designed specifically to gleam in this dim, candlelight gloom, not under the harsh glare of electricity. You are living inside a masterpiece of light and shadow. From the street outside, you hear a lonely rhythmic sound. Clack, clack, pause, clack, clack. It is the night watchman patrolling the ward. He strikes two wooden blocks, hayoshigi, together. His voice drifts through the thin walls, chanting the nightly mantra, Hai no yojin, machi ippon, kaji no moto. Beware of fire. One match is the source of the fire. It is a lullaby of caution. It reminds you that you are safe, for now, and that someone is watching over the wooden city. The sound recedes into the distance, fading like a heartbeat slowing down. You prepare your bed. If it is summer, you have one more ritual to perform, hanging the kaya, the mosquito net. You suspend this green, hemp mesh tent from the corners of the room. It creates a room within a room, a smaller, intimate cube of protection. You crawl inside. The world outside the net blurs into a haze. The smell of the hemp is grassy and dry. It feels surprisingly cozy, a fortress against the buzzing insects that plague the humid Japanese night. You lie down on the futon. Remember that hard wooden pillow, the Takamakura from this morning? You look at it. You think about your neck. You decide to cheat. You push the wooden torture device aside and bundle up some clothes, or use your arm as a cushion. No one is watching. The sumptuary laws don't apply to your dreams. As you lie there, you listen to the passage of time. But time here is different. You hear the distant boom of a temple bell striking the hour. Gong. Gong. Here is the mainstream historical fact that distorts your sense of the night. The Japanese used a temporal hour system. The daylight was divided into 6 hours, and the night into 6 hours. This meant that in the summer, day hours were long and night hours were short. In the winter, the opposite was true. Time was elastic. It stretched and shrank with the seasons. You weren't ruled by the mechanical tick-tock of a clock, but by the rhythm of the sun and the moon. The bell you hear isn't telling you it's 10 p.m. It's telling you it's the hour of the boar. You are floating in a fluid river of time. Historians still argue about how people actually slept in this era. Did they sleep in one solid 8-hour block like we try to do? Or did they follow the pattern of segmented sleep, seen in pre-industrial Europe, waking up in the middle of the night for an hour of quiet contemplation, smoking, or, let's be honest, making more citizens for the census? The literature of the time, filled with poems written in the dead of night, suggests the latter. The night was a second day for the mind, a time for private thoughts that couldn't be spoken in the glare of the sun. You stare up at the ceiling of the mosquito net. You think about the Baku. This is a fringe bit of folklore that is actually quite sweet. The Baku is a mythological creature, often depicted with the trunk of an elephant, the eyes of a rhino, and the paws of a tiger. It is a dream eater. If you wake up from a nightmare, maybe a dream about an angry samurai or a running out of rice, you can whisper into the darkness 3 times, "Baku-san, come eat my dream." The legend says the creature will come and consume the bad omen, leaving you with a clean slate. It was such a popular belief that people would sleep on pillows with the kanji for Baku embroidered on them. A talisman for mental health? You whisper it softly just in case. Come eat the day. Take the exhaustion. Your body sinks into the tatami. The floor is hard, but it feels grounding. You feel the earth beneath the floorboards. You are connected to it. The exhaustion you feel is a clean one. It's the exhaustion of survival. You planted the rice. You walked the road. You dodged the fires. You followed the rules. You did it. The sounds of the house settling surround you, the creak of a timber beam cooling down, the rustle of the wind in the thatch, the faint chirping of a cricket in the garden. These are the sounds that have lulled people to sleep on these islands for thousands of years. They are ancient, organic white noise. You realize that despite the hardships, the taxes, the strict laws, the drafts, there is a profound beauty in this life. It is a life of immense mindfulness. You have to be aware of the seasons, your neighbors, your station, and your spirit. You cannot sleepwalk through this existence. You have to be present. And now, your presence is fading. The paper walls seem to glow with the moonlight filtering through, turning the room into a silver box. The shadows stop dancing and stand still. The floating world stops floating and comes to rest. You close your eyes. The visuals of the samurai swords, the green rice paddies, and the colorful kimonos begin to dissolve. They swirl together into a tapestry of history, then fade into a soft monochromatic gray. You are no longer a peasant or a warrior. You are just a consciousness, drifting on the edge of sleep, carried by the current of the night. The heavy wooden gates of the checkpoint are open. The road ahead is clear. There are no papers required for where you're going next. You take a deep breath, inhaling the scent of the tatami and the night air. You let it out, releasing the tension of the Edo period. You drift away under the paper moon into the deep, timeless peace of the past. And just like that, the wooden clogs stop clattering, and the temple bells fade into silence. You can let go of the straw sandals now. You can let go of the heavy kimono and the worry about the rice tax. You are no longer in that drafty, fragile paper house. Feel the surface beneath you right now. It is soft, warm, and supports you perfectly. There are no drafts here. No hard wooden pillows. You are safe in your own time, in your own space, protected by walls that keep the world and its worries far away. Take a slow, deep breath. Imagine that with every exhale, the vibrant, chaotic colors of the floating world are washing away, leaving behind a cool, quiet, blank canvas. The samurai, the farmers, the firemen, they are all resting now, sleeping in the pages of history. They have done their work, and so have you. Your only task now is to drift, to let the heavy, pleasant weight of sleep pull you down, deeper and deeper, just like a stone sinking slowly into a quiet moonlit pond. The water is cool and still. The ripples spread out slower and slower until the surface is like glass. You are safe. You are warm. You are ready to rest. Thank you for walking this long, winding road with me tonight. I hope the journey was interesting, but I hope even more that you are barely awake to hear this. Good night.